What's up, everybody? Our phasers are set to stun, and we are ready to talk about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. My name is Spencer Henderson, and I am a Cinemaholic.
I'm Stephen Perry, and I'm a Star Wars junkie and Cinemaholic.
And my name is Ryan. I'm a Cinemaholic.
And I'm Bela, and I'm also a Cinemaholic.
Today, specifically until Sunday, so that we could talk about spoilers. So, warning up front, we are going to be talking about spoilers, but today we are talking about The Last Jedi, which is Episode 8 for those of you keeping track at home. This is directed by Rian Johnson, the guy who also brought us awesome movies like these. And yes, Joseph Gordon-Levitt does make a cameo in this movie. This is awesome. We're following these new characters that they've set up in Episode 7, and we've still got some of the old ones from the original trilogy, which is 4, 5, and 6. Rian Johnson, he's known for his dark and gritty take on sci-fi and the sci-fi genre. So, to start us off, we've all been waiting for this. The Last Jedi review is here. We'll go very, very, very brief, non-spoilers thoughts first. Go around all of us, and then we're going to kick it in, and we're going to talk about some some specific spoiler stuff. So I think Spencer is the reigning champion. He has seen this movie the most times. So I'll throw it over to you first. Spencer, how many times have you seen it, and what are your thoughts?
I've seen The Last Jedi 3 times, and I am an enormous fan of this movie. I've been rooting for this since it was announced that Rian Johnson would be directing Episode 8. I remember just hearing that news and thinking, okay, we don't have to worry about Episode 8. And we really didn't, as far as I'm concerned. I'm actually kind of surprised to see the amount of division, or I was initially surprised to see the amount of division on Rotten Tomatoes, but I honestly feel like a lot of that has to do with people trolling this movie, because it has a cinema score of an A, which is pretty good considering cinema score is like a poll, just a random poll that people do of audiences coming out of movies. But for me, this movie is a complete home run. I think that it is one of my favorite Star Wars movies, if not my very favorite. I think that it evolves the series in some really interesting ways. It is filled with incredible sequences. It's filled with great performance. The style of it is great. The writing is great. The execution of it is great. I really love the way this story moves, and kind of what we find out about the characters and how we see these characters' complexities, I think really, really works extremely well in this movie. That's about all I can say right now without spoilers. So let's move to Steven. What'd you think of The Last Jedi?
So like you are with siblings or family members, where you're hypercritical of them, I'm hypercritical of Star Wars. And after analyzing it, I've seen it once. I'm planning on seeing it a few more times. But after analyzing it, and even the first impression, I went from really liking it to now I love it. I think the characters are developed perfectly, and I was 100% satisfied with the kind of risky directions that they took some of the characters. We'll get into that. And the answers to the big questions that we've all been grilling over for the last 2 years were very satisfying for me. And it was a breath of fresh air to see the way Rian Johnson handled that. Kind of how Spence mentioned, it was fresh, and it definitely expanded the universe. We learned more things about the Force and what it can and can't do. And thematically, there were so many themes that were interwoven that it was just really uplifting, and I thought it had a lot of substance to it. What did you think, Bella? Popcorn Bella?
Okay, yeah. So I'm new to Star Wars, fairly new, and I watched Force Awakens and at the theaters, and also Rogue One. And then I finally ended up watching all the other movies, and I really enjoyed this one. I think is not my favorite, but one of my favorite Star Wars movie. And I really enjoyed it. It's so epic. I thought it was the most epic movie from the Star Wars franchise. And I love exactly how you said they well, I don't want to go into spoilers, of course, but they expand a little bit more about the universe, and also they explain a little bit more about the Force, and I really enjoyed that. And as a new person, there were a lot of things. I mean, as a person that just started in this universe, learning about all these things, I think is really easy and something that even people that never watched Star Wars, they'll still enjoy it.
Loved it. I think the biggest thing for me that stood out with the marketing was they were always pushing that line from Luke saying in the trailers and stuff, this is not going to turn out the way that you think it's going to. And that was a huge thing over and over and over and over again. And it paid off. It honestly paid off. And I think it paid off in the best way it could, because I kept thinking to myself, oh, I'm smart enough or whatever. I'm good. Oh, they have to do this, or they're going to do this. And no, it came out exactly like they marketed the movie. We're going to make Ryan Johnson made the movie he wanted to make. And so hands up, and that's the thing. Everyone gets so upset. And this could be like Spencer was saying, why people are getting so upset is because we spent the last 2 years making theories and speculations, and they didn't address that. He did what he wanted to do. And I think a lot of people are getting worked up over that. And they're like, oh, this isn't the way that I wanted it to turn out. Who cares? It's the way it turned out. I mean, it's what we're stuck with. So you either like it or you don't like it. I personally love it. And at this moment, Empire is my favorite, but this is honestly on par. I'm not brave enough to say that this is my favorite yet. I've seen it 3 times. It's good. It's good. So we're gonna go spoilers now. So that's your official warning. If you haven't seen the movie, abort now, go see it, come back and check out our spoiler discussion, because I don't think we're really gonna necessarily review the movie going forward. We're just gonna have a talk about it. We're gonna talk about the pros, the cons. We're gonna talk about the 3 separate stories that go on. We're just gonna geek out a little bit because we all love the Star Wars universe. So we decided to split it up into the 3 kind of sections and categories that we follow. We follow the Rebels, which is mainly Poe's character and General Leia. And then we kind of go on a side mission following Rose and Finn. And then we also have the Rey and Luke storyline. So let's just start kind of how the movie starts with Poe and General Leia. And we'll talk about that storyline. Right off the top, we get some really cool battle sequences. We get Poe talking to Hux and the Rebels escaping. Steven, why don't you start us off? What worked for you in this storyline and what didn't really work for you?
So the whole storyline?
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll be able to answer that question a lot more the second time around. But one of the common criticisms I've heard is that some of the motivations are unclear. And I didn't have a big problem with that. I loved the idea of Poe being a rebel at heart, and that Admiral Holdo saw that and recognized that as a strength, even though it ended up also being a really big weakness and costing a lot of lives. And so it was cool by the end seeing how Poe flipped that around and was able to start using that as a strength and calling the safer shots. I also loved the beginning, the bombers. I thought that was a great throwback to the World War II influences that George Lucas originally instilled in A New Hope. Popcorn, Spence, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I loved Poe's story. Loved it. In Force Awakens, I feel like Poe was he was a fun character, but to me he was a throwaway character because he was somebody who was a cocky pilot, and that's all there really was to him. He was a kind of a one-liner machine is what I kind of felt like with him. And the one-liners were fun, and I liked him. I liked being around him, but I didn't really feel all that much depth to his character. The way they approached his character and explored it in this movie really made him interesting to me. We get to see the way he ticks and kind of how impulsive he is, and he has a great arc to kind of turn from those he realizes the gravity that those have lives. You referenced the opening sequence. One thing I wanted to say real quick is I knew like 5 shots into this movie that I love this movie, because there's a scene where we're on the ground and the sky, and we look up into the sky and we see Star Destroyers come out of light speed. And I feel like we've never seen that happen from the ground of a planet, and it's kind of just this impending doom. And it just showed me that Rian Johnson was going to give us a completely different look at this world and a different kind of style. And it just felt so confident to me. Also, the sequence with Rose's sister at the beginning I found to be really powerful and completely dialogue free. I was really like kind of emotionally invested in that moment of tension that we had. But with Poe's storyline, the dynamic between him and Vice Admiral Haldo I found to be really interesting. And I feel like that's where I've heard lots of people's motivations being unclear with her. I guess why she didn't translate the information that they were going to evacuate the ship to Crate. I guess I was under the impression that them being chased through light speed, my personal theory was that there was going to be a mole. That was the first thing I thought, is one of the people on the Resistance spaceship has informed the First Order. So I figured she was just trying to be careful about that. She has a great arc as well. And of course, everything with Leia I found to be really good and powerful. So Ryan, Bella, what'd you guys think of Poe's storyline?
So I liked it. I really liked the idea that Poe had more screen time compared to Force Awakens, and we got to know him a little bit more. I really like his character. And I really liked the scene, Leia's scene. And one thing that also on my trailer reaction, everyone commented, or at least a lot of people commented, that I that I was only focusing on Kylo Ren when he was about to explode. And actually in the movie it turned out that, I mean, he almost did it, but then he was like, oh, never mind, I can't do it. And then another person did it. So I was like, yeah. But I was not happy because they fired the ship, but I was happy that Kylo Ren didn't do it. But I really like that sequence with Leia, and that she had Force. And it was like in the beginning, I was like, oh, okay, so it runs in the family, So it's really interesting to see that. But then eventually, it changed it. But I enjoyed that part. It was really good.
Starting from the very beginning for me, Paige, her shot, that's probably one of my favorite shots in the whole movie, where she's kicking the remote detonator to come down, and then everything goes silent. You're hearing Poe, well, you're seeing Poe scream, and you're seeing the First Order scream, and it's just silent. You're only hearing Paige's character. She's trying to get this detonator. You think that she misses it, but then she grabs it. And then there's just a shot of her through the grate as both the destroyer is being blown up, as well as her bomber is being blown up. And you just see her face, and she feels both remorse and both satisfaction for dying for the right cause. And it's just such a beautiful shot that, like Spence, I was like, we're going different directions with this movie. And I like what you said, Stephen, about all the World War influences that then came into this. And I think that was such a great way to start it and to head us in that direction. And Poe and Holdo's was mainly just a setup for Poe to take over the rebellion. This was, Poe had to learn his lessons. Like Yoda says to Luke, you to be a good leader, you have to pass on your failures as well. And this was just a moment that Poe had to fail. He had to learn those lessons so that he could then, in episode 9, take over the mantle and lead this rebellion. I think for me, this is something that I'll mention twice in this whole spoiler thing, is for me, reading all of the books, I think that's actually really benefited a lot more than some people who haven't read the books, because Holdo is a huge character in the Leia book. And seeing her translate actually to the screen, we've never seen her before, and then all of a sudden she's here. I've heard some people like, why does she have purple hair? And not that it's like a huge thing, but like it's explained in the book, and you kind of know her characteristics, and you know her. And for me, it was more like she knows Poe's type. She knows that he's just trigger happy, and he needs to take a step down in humility. He needs to learn his place, because you don't just get to come up from a captain's position and make all the calls. You kind of got to earn the information as you go. And I'm new here. I kind of have to earn everyone's respect. I'm not just going to start telling everyone what the plan is. So for me, it really worked. I mean, if I was in her situation, I don't know how I would be reacting, but I would probably try and, have that era of confidence and not spoil everything, like, oh, we're retreating. That's the plan. Overall, to me, it doesn't really even matter. I think it plays out very well. I was satisfied with all of the character choices. I loved seeing Leia use the Force. It was a little execution-wise, I don't know if it worked as well as it could have for me, but I was very satisfied. I think we needed to see her use the Force. So I'm happy with where that went. Going off of that, let's jump into Finn and Rose's, since we're talking about Paige and stuff. Spence, if you want to start us off, let's talk about their little excursion trip to Canto Bight, and their kind of love story, actually, and then we'll hop on to Luke and Rey.
I feel like this is the one that I've heard the most complaints about, and probably out of the three, I wouldn't say I didn't like their storyline. I just think it's probably the weakest of the three. I think that both John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran have really strong chemistry with each other, as far as kind of like their back and forths. And I feel like they genuinely, at least I felt like the two characters cared about each other by the end of this journey that they went on. The Canto Bight sequence itself was a little bit underwhelming. It was needed for the plot, but and I really don't have any issues with what happened. I just think that it's not as strong as the rest of the movie. That being said, I still really love John Boyega as Finn. I felt like he had a really great arc in the story as well. I was honestly a little bit disappointed when he was going to take out the big door blaster, and Rose went in and took him out. I did find her line to be moving, but I felt that was a really powerful moment of Finn having this arc, that he finally had decided that the Resistance was something worth, a cause worth giving his own life for, and making this incredibly selfless act, and it is immediately undercut. And I do think that her articulation, her line is beautiful, but at the same time, I thought the kiss felt a little bit forced and kind of out of left field. Even though you could argue that it was set up from their first interaction. But I think Kelly Marie Tran was great. She was very charming. She almost felt like a Star Wars fan within the movie, because at the first she's like, I've heard of you. And she talks about him like this figure, that kind of how we as pop culture view someone like Finn in Star Wars. So I found her to be a really endearing character. And I loved the whole sequence with Captain Phasma and Finn. I thought that was really, really visually striking. There's this shot where he like swings his like shock stick or whatever, and you can see the reflection of him through Captain Phasma's helmet, and it's such an epic shot. I was just like, who even thinks to show us something like that? But it was so cool, and yeah, overall I really liked it. I know people have their complaints. I don't think those complaints are unwarranted, but it still worked for me because it moved the plot forward. So Steven, what do you think of the Finn Rose storyline?
So I think going into this movie, it is important for people to realize it does have flaws. I don't think it deserves even a fragment of the hate that it's been getting, but some of those flaws are in like the Canto Bite sequence. That whole sequence doesn't necessarily push the story along. You could cut that out and rework the script and shorten it a lot. Besides thematically, just this movie being more of an anti-war movie, and also setting up the payoff at the end with the next generation of Force users. And aesthetically, I really like Canto Bite. Lots of people I've talked to don't like Rose. I thought she was really good. I mean, her acting wasn't on par with the rest of the cast, but I thought it was still very good.
Probably just talking to a bunch of racists.
Yeah, probably that. Any more wise words? And I loved her line at the end. I thought that was very poignant. There's a famous Martin Luther King Jr. line where he says, hate or darkness can't cast out darkness. Only light does that. Love or light can't, or shoot, I'm screwing it up. Hate can't cast out hate. Only love can do that. And that was the epitome of her line. And I think that's a really important message nowadays when, you know, we do still have warmongers who are like, oh, let's just go blow up Korea, you know? But yeah, I was satisfied with that portion.
Can I just cut in real quick? Yeah. I think, Steven, that's a really good point. I think that that line was very Star Wars. You know, it felt like it belonged within this world, and these movies are really supposed to be uplifting. And I think that, yeah, you've kind of sold me even more on the line. So that's all.
No, yeah, I'll continue with that, and I'll talk a little bit more about it when we start talking about Luke and Rey. But I think that was Rian Johnson's intention with this whole movie, is to look us in the eyes, look the fans in the eyes, and say, you know, with all the theories, maybe we're getting a little bit crazy about all this crap. Let's remember what Star Wars is about. Let's strip it down to the fundamentals, that this is about love, and that this is about evil and family and the good and the blood. And, you know, let's remember these themes about what we started with. You know, let's talk about that for a little bit. And that's why that storyline really works for me of Rose and Finn, is because that's honestly, I've heard a lot of people, and the first viewing I was like, well, you could take the whole Canto Bite stuff out and it doesn't change the outcome because they get onto the ship and it still doesn't work anyways. So they didn't have to go to Canto Bite, but personally, that's necessary for Finn. And on a second viewing, I came to realize that it wasn't, they didn't go to Canto Bite in the long term. Rian Johnson didn't have them go to Canto Bite to do all this stuff to save the day. They went there so that Finn could see the good and the bad, and so that Finn could have this self-discovery of, this is why I'm going to give my life for the rebellion. I am this person. I am going to make that sacrifice, and it works so well for me with that. And I think their chemistry is really good, and I think I don't have any issues. I think it naturally progressed to the point that it got to. Maybe the kiss was just kind of like forced. I mean, it's like, oh, we got to have a kiss here, but the line was great, like everyone has said so far, and the lead up to that, everything felt so natural and so like it fit and flowed so well. I started reading the Canto Bite book, got 6 chapters in and just kind of stopped. I lost interest. Nothing about Canto Bite really intrigues me, so I wasn't too thrilled about that part of the movie. But thinking about about Finn and thinking about Rose and how they get there, and even DJ, like Benicio del Toro's character doesn't have a huge role. I'm sure he'll be back in number 9, but he's the one who brings up the theory of you get them today, they'll get you tomorrow. These people are selling to both sides. And that's the thing that intrigued me the most about this movie, was we're now talking about these between the lines kind of conversations of what does it mean to be in war? I mean, the same guys are selling weapons to both people. Where do you stand? Does it really matter if you stand on a side? Because these people obviously are right in the middle, just shelling out both to bring in the money. So I really dug this storyline and where that went. And I loved those themes that they were introducing. But I do agree, out of all of the storylines, I think it was kind of the one that was the least moving forward. You know, it didn't kind of push the story as much as I would have hoped it could have, but I wouldn't take it out of the movie. I wouldn't fast forward it on Blu-ray. I wouldn't skip it. I definitely watch it. What are your thoughts?
So I enjoyed it. I agree. I thought it was the weakest story with all the 3 stories, and I personally don't think they have a chemistry like Finn and Rose. They might exist, but I don't think it's really strong. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something, I guess. But you were talking about war and that theme, and I agree. I don't think there's such a thing that is right or wrong. It's war. There's no right side or or wrong side. It's just everyone's doing the same thing. And I don't know how exactly that would be for Star Wars, because it's different. It's still a theme. There's dark side, and there's all these things happening. But I thought it was the weakest part of it. I thought it was okay. Like, it didn't mind so much to me. Didn't matter. But also, I forgot what else.
I'll cut in for just a second. I remembered you had talked about Phasma. I read the Phasma book, and I still feel like her character was way underused. She didn't show up until 2 hours into the movie, but the moment that we got with her, having read the Phasma book, was so engaging. Seeing her fighting her student and the exchange that they have, and the whole point of the Phasma book is that she doesn't show her face. And then to see her helmet get smashed, and her whole armor was chrome plated and forged from Emperor Palpatine's ship. That's how she went and she got his ship and forged it into her suit. And to see it just kind of and Finn just smashing the eye, and you see her face, you see that it's just it worked so well for me. And she's dead. I mean, you can't bring her back from that. But
Rebels.
I wish we could have seen more, but I was satisfied with what we got, honestly.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I like Phasma, so I like that scene as well. I don't have any more comments about that section. I thought it was okay.
So let's move on. Steven, you started saying something. Did you have something to say?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay, so we're gonna hop on to Rey and Luke, and then we'll kind of open it up to discuss the ending altogether, where the 3 storylines kind of clash together in the climax. So just kind of the island stuff, the Skellig Michael Island. What Steven, you start us off. What are your thoughts on the Luke and Rey chemistry and with Yoda?
I just want to say I was so satisfied. Everything involving Luke, Rey, and Kylo, I thought were perfect. And it was just so satisfying to see someone like Rian Johnson be brave enough to take a beloved character and show that he has failures as well, and that everybody can get in a funk, and he had good reasons for getting into a funk. And I think all fans were waiting for that moment for Luke to blow away all the AT-ATs with his hands just off the planet, or like crunch them like a tin can. Except by the end, Luke had become a true Jedi. He'd gotten to the point where he was above, in my opinion, the prequels Jedi with their hubris and arrogance, as he said, to where he wanted to save lives instead of take them. And I found that so satisfying, and I liked how quirky Luke was. The green milk scene, I loved that. I thought that was perfect. It kind of struck me as like 80s fantasy, just kind of bizarre. And one last thought on all of that. I thought one reason I like to see a more human Luke is because, like what Rian Johnson did with the Rey's parentage and Snoke's background, where he basically gave everyone the finger. That's kind of what he did with Luke as well. Everybody in this culture, we have our heroes and we worship our heroes. And this just showed that people don't deserve to be worshipped for their own sake. That's all.
Spence. I think he's gone. Spencer, are you okay?
Okay, I think we just went out. Did you push it over to me? Sorry, I missed like everything you just said.
No, yeah, Spence, it's all you. What did you think about Luke and Rey?
Yeah, apologies, guys. I had technical difficulties. I really loved everything about this storyline. Every single approach Rian Johnson took, I thought was executed perfectly. We start with Rey handing Luke the lightsaber, and he throws the lightsaber right behind him. And I feel like it wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say it was Johnson giving us the finger. I would say it was him saying this movie is going to go in unexpected directions. And I think it was saying that really us as fans making these theories about who are Rey's parents, who is Supreme Leader Snoke, we were asking the wrong questions about this series, like in general. All that stuff doesn't really matter. And I loved the way that he approached that, and his approach to Luke Skywalker in general was the thing I was most nervous about with this movie. And I think he completely nailed it. I loved how flawed Luke's character was, and how kind of it felt like the natural progression of what would have happened to this character with the events that have taken place in the 30 years that we did not see. And it really, like Steven says, it creates a really interesting dynamic about how themselves, like Luke was the person who originally had saved the galaxy as a whole, and now he is somebody who is a broken person, and the movie is just as arc as it is about Rey's arc and about Kylo Ren's arc. Kind of communicating to each other through the Force, I found to be incredibly interesting and satisfying. And honestly, to me, MVP performance of the movie is Adam Driver. I think Adam Driver as Kylo Ren in this was incredible. And I also really my absolute favorite thing this movie did was what it did with Supreme Leader Snoke. I was so happy that we don't have to deal with some BS about, Rian Johnson has a quote, and I actually have it pulled up. I'm going to read it. So it's addressing people's dissatisfaction to Supreme Leader Snoke and how it was handled. And said about revealing some type of big identity. It would have stopped any of these scenes dead cold if he had stopped and given a 30-second speech about how he's Darth Plagueis. It doesn't matter to Rey. If he would have done that, Rey would have blinked and said, "Who?" And the scene would have gone on, and I'm not saying he's Darth Plagueis. And that's so true. Think about it. A scavenger girl who comes from nothing. Her parents are nobodies, like the movie says. Hearing Darth Plagueis, that would only be for fans. Literally only for fans. And if it would have happened, I would have been pissed, and I would have left this movie pissed. Having Supreme Leader Snoke be a stepping stone for Kylo Ren to become an even more powerful, menacing villain and completely unhinged at this point is something that raises the stakes to a level that I am incredibly happy that a filmmaker like Rian Johnson had the guts to take it in that direction.
Yeah, so I think I like the reason why everyone was expecting what they were expecting is that the fans, they got used to the same pattern. Not the same pattern, but there's a pattern. And like all these like family, everyone was related to each other, and there's this thing with the other movies. So coming to this movie, it was so different from the rest that a lot of people got disappointed. And personally, I really liked this storyline. It was my favorite, and I love everything about it. I love Kylo Ren. He's one of my favorite characters, and he's always been. And it's really funny now because a lot of people like Kylo Ren, so I think I'm hipster because I liked him before everyone else. But yeah, I really liked everything. And one of my favorite scenes was when Kylo and Rey were fighting together. And that was pretty awesome. I loved it. And I loved how Snoke died too. It was really fun. It kind of just like, because I have the saying that everyone cuts people's arms in Star Wars, and seeing Snoke cut in half was really.
But they cut
satisfying.
his arm off too.
Yeah, it cut his arm off.
Oh,
It
really?
cut his arm off, and his arm just like his whole body falls off the chair,
Yeah.
and his hand is just sitting on the chair.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that can I just cut in? That scene is like for me, that's the best lightsaber scene ever put to film.
Mm-hmm.
The way that thing is shot, and Adam Driver's like physical performance loses his is like exhilaratingly thrilled. And at that point, I thought that he had gone good. So I was like, oh my goodness, like where are they going to go with this? And so it continually surprised me. And
Exactly. Spencer, you're gonna hate me after this, but I was really hoping that they kissed. They didn't.
Ugh.
Stop.
Oh my gosh. They don't know.
yeah, this got weird real quick.
I'm sorry.
Here's my thing with this whole thing. I think Luke was handled masterfully. Every single line out of his mouth worked for me, and in repeated viewings, it just gets better and it gets better. Because I mean, me and Spence talked about it the other day. The line at the very beginning where he's like, "What did you expect from coming here?" He's like, "Why do you think I came to like the most deserted island on the most deserted planet ever? Like, did you just expect me to come with a laser sword and take on the whole First Order?" Which is exactly what he does. He walks up with a laser sword and takes on the First Order. Everything that he says is way. Touching moments for him was when Chewie knocks down the door.
Work.
And he's like, "Chewie, what are you doing here?" And she's like, "Well, explain it all back in the Falcon." And he's like, "Wait a minute, the Falcon? Where's Han?" And in that moment, you see every single emotion run through Mark Hamill's eyes as he sits there and he realizes, I did this to Kylo, and now Kylo's killed his father. Han is dead. And that moment is just so good. All of Rey and Luke's scenes are like that. I as well love Kylo. I don't know what people have always been like, "Oh, he's so whiny." I've liked that. I think he's just a kid that has just started down this path and wants to get there, and he just gets pissed. He loses his mind, and he's just like, "This." I've loved it. And I think everything in this movie, my hands down favorite part of this, and I will say this, my favorite moment in Star Wars history is the climax of this movie where the three stories intertwine. and this battle happens where Rey and Kylo are fighting. And that's the moment that they both saw when they touched hands, which is something we haven't even talked about. This new Force stuff that they're bringing up where they're seeing each other, which we later find out Snoke is causing, that they can see each other. And they clearly established the rules to that Kylo isn't seeing where she's at. He's just seeing her. And he catches a glimpse of Luke. But when they touch hands and they have this moment where she's convinced she sees him turn and he's convinced he sees her turn, and the moment that they saw was them fighting together, and they both had convinced themselves that they turned to the other side. And I think that was so masterfully played out because you didn't know at that point. I mean, he cuts Snoke in half, and then Rey catches the lightsaber, and you're like, what the freak is about to happen? And then they have this awesome slow-mo shot where they go back to back, and they just like, and then it speeds up, and it is the most epic fight in Star Wars history. I love it. And like Spence said, just the choreography, how well it's shot and meticulously shot. You know, this happens over here, this happens over here, everything just, and that, I think a lot of people in episode 3 and all of the prequels, they're like, oh, but the lightsaber battles were so cool. They're cool, but really they come across just as like a very choreographed dance in the prequels where we hit these beats when we hit these beats. This felt like a brawl. This felt like a fight, and that's why it worked so well for me. And just the moment, the climax, where all the 3 stories lead up to the same moment. Rey's trying to get the lightsaber back. Kylo's trying to get the lightsaber, and it's just suspended in midair, and they start forcing each other back as the music swells, and you hear John Williams. I cannot explain every single time I've seen this movie how I felt in that moment. I just am filled with such emotion seeing this all pay off the way that it's paying off. And like you've both said, I don't necessarily think it's a direct middle finger, but it's Rian Johnson saying, who cares, guys? Let's talk about Star Wars. At no point did J.J. Abrams necessarily say Rey's parents matter. We as a society have started all of that. We started that. Like, oh, who's her parents? Oh, what's the lineage? Who cares? This story from the beginning has been set up to be Rey and Kylo, and that's what it led up to in this movie. Who cares about Snoke? Get rid of him. Get him out of the way. Now we've got Kylo reaching his full potential. That scene is pivotal because it made Kylo make a decision. It made Rey make a decision, and now they know that they've both made the decision. They're not going to try and, diddly pink around this anymore. We have our established villain and we have our established hero, and I think it's handed off perfectly. So I'm gonna slow down a little bit. I'll toss it back over to Spencer. Let's talk about Crate, the final battle. We'll talk about my favorite cameo in the whole movie, which is Gareth Edwards, and then we'll talk about the conclusion. So Spence, over to you.
I think Steven had something he wanted to say. Steven?
Oh no, we're good. We're good. Yeah, we're past that.
Okay. Well, yeah, the whole crate sequence, incredible. That's like basically all I have to say. Door, like looking up in the sky's just completely white, and then out of the sky we see the spaceship of Finn and Rose being chased down by TIE fighters, and it just like all of a sudden appears out of the sky, and it's like one of the most beautiful images I have seen in Star Wars ever. I also noticed the Gareth Edwards cameo, and I thought that was pretty great. He's just in the background right behind the guy who's like, it's salt, right? That was Gareth Edwards.
Yeah, he's the guy right next to the guy who says it's salt.
Yeah, I thought I recognized him, and I was like, is that Gareth Edwards? And yeah, so that was great. But their whole the spaceships that they fly that kick up the salt, super, super cool. I love how it really keeps the rebels or the underdogs thing going. And this is a movie about a retreat, essentially, Luke Skywalker going and facing down everybody distracting the First Order so that the rebels can get away, and having Poe kind of go through the arc of, sometimes it's better that we run, and telling Finn, no, we're not going to go out and back up Luke Skywalker. It would be suicide, and we got to live to fight another day. I loved all of that. And Luke's whole entire wipe off his shoulder thing was so great. I love that. And the whole entire last sequence. One thing that I heard and then I paid attention to the most recent time I saw it was that Luke's footprints don't make any sort of skids. And it's so cool that there's like they put that much meticulous detail into what they were doing. And Kylo Ren is sliding all over the place. The salt is making it all red on the ground. I just and I found that whole entire Luke being so powerful in the Force that he did that to be way more satisfying than now AT-ATs and lightsaber fighting people. I really found that to be emotional and moving. And just briefly, I wanted to comment on the fact that to have Luke Skywalker die looking at two suns, like on a planet, staring out at them, and then disappearing the way that Yoda did or Obi-Wan did, and becoming one with the Force, I found to be the perfect Luke Skywalker death scene. So, Stephen, what are your thoughts on all of this?
So, during the trailers, one of the most exciting locations, just watching the trailers, is the crate sequence with the red dust getting thrown into the air. And I was so engaged in the movie that I forgot about that sequence. And so after, kind of the fake out climax with Kylo and Rey taking out all those guards, I'm like, oh, sweet, we still have the crate sequence to look forward to. And so I was super excited for that. And it paid off. A lot of the shots and the colors, it felt like you're reading this comic book, this graphic novel. It was just so visceral. And I think you nailed it with the fact that this wasn't about spectacle, even though it was hugely spectacle and amazing to watch. It came down to an emotional conflict between two very important characters. And just touching on the end sequence, like you said, I think if they would have had a violent death for Luke, like they did with Han, that wouldn't have worked. I mean, it could have been epic or something, but I thought it was a lot better to have him die a peaceful death and go out in that fashion. Just otherwise, if everyone, the three beloved main characters, died a violent death, then it'd just be as if they were being punished for all the good works they'd done or something like that. So I was very moved by the ending. Over to you, Bela and Ryan.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked that sequence. It was really, really good. And I was really excited for all the colors that really stood out for me in the trailer. So that, I agree, paid off. And I like that scene where Leia and Luke, they meet and they talk, and I think it was really moving.
I changed my hair.
Yeah, it was really cute. And it made me happy, made me smile. And yes, I agree with Luke's death. It was perfect. It had to be like that. It wouldn't work if it was a different way. So
guys, I don't even know. I have so much that I'd like to say. I feel like it ends so poetically. And I would love if people would just take a second. Everyone who's hating on anything in this movie, just take a second and like realize how poetic it is. And Luke is staring at Kylo Ren, and before he leaves, he says, "See you around, kid," something that his father said to Luke. That's one of the last things that were said. It's such a emotional piece of art. And the thing that stands out the most in the whole crate sequence, like everyone has said, is just the contrast and the colors and the way that was so cinematically shot and portrayed. It's just something that you can't read in a book. It's something that you have to see. You have to see these speeders kicking up the salt and the red. And I noticed that as well. Someone had pointed it out. There are so many little things, details that they point out that show you Luke isn't there the whole time. I mean, he's holding the lightsaber that we just saw Rey and Kylo split in half, broken in half at the end of the movie, and he's not leaving any footprints. He's not, there's a lot of things that lead up that it's not like they just kind of drop it on you. I mean, they've clearly thought out everything behind the new mythology that they're putting forward. It's not kind of a half-assed thing. One of my favorite lines in the whole thing is when Poe is taking over and he says, "Follow me." Everyone turns and looks at Leia and she's like, "What are you looking at me for? Follow him." It's such a nice handing off of the baton. Follow that guy. He's the new, and that's the other thing throughout this whole movie. I think it's said 3 or 4 different times. We are the spark that will ignite the rebellion. I just think that's such a poetic and such a great line that is the theme of this whole movie, that this is, and that's the whole ending sequence with Broom Boy, is that Broom Boy is the spark. He's going to be the flame. He's the next generation. I think it couldn't have ended better. This is the only way that I would say Luke dies without dying. I would say he was more translated. And yeah, he just like, it's such a beautiful thing. I do need to go back. We didn't even talk about Yoda, which was the one time in my first viewing I did shed a tear. It was so good, so beautiful, and this is a good example of fan service that works well. It furthers the story, and it was the Yoda that we love from Dagobah, the mischievous little wizard who blows crap up, and that is a perfect planting for later on. If Yoda, a guy who is dead, throw up a lightning bolt and straight, why can't Luke fight Kylo Ren from the other side of the galaxy? Like, they are clearly establishing these rules and backing them up. And that was one of my favorite, is that he's always knows so much. And he talks to Luke and he says what he's always said to Luke: you're focusing too much on the stars. You need to focus on what's in front of you. And he smacks him in the face, and then he blows up the tree. He's like, "Go ahead, light it up." And Luke goes and he almost lights it. And then Yoda's like, just blows it up, and he just sits there giggling and laughing. And I'm like, yes, it's another thing that it's like, it doesn't matter, guys. Let's focus on what really matters. And one of my favorite lines again is how Yoda ends his conversation. I'm going to butcher it, but he basically says the master is going to be known by the people that he trains, and that's kind of the legacy that you have to be known by, and that's just what it means to be a master. Sometimes they go down the wrong path. Sometimes they go down the right path. We just need to do our best, and how they turn out is what we're going to be known for. I loved the Yoda sequence. Do you have any comments on that or any further?
I like Yoda sequence. I think it was awesome, and I love his laugh. So that's all I have to say.
Steven, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said it was a fan service, but it didn't feel unnecessary to the story. Same with the bit where R2-D2, he showed the original message from A New Hope. To me, that was kind of recognizing that The Force Awakens did have a very similar structure to A New Hope. And Rian Johnson was saying, you know what, that's okay. And he was acknowledging that. And on top of that, in Rogue One and Force Awakens, you have these little tidbits, like when you see Ponda Boba in Rogue One, where that doesn't add to the story. Or in Force Awakens, when you have the chessboard that pops up with Finn sitting there. As cool as that is, it doesn't push along the story. Spence.
Yeah, ditto. I agree with everything you guys said about Yoda. I feel like I can't really add anything to that. And I was going to bring up the R2 thing. So you literally just said everything I want. I'll just quickly comment. The Porgs were awesome. So that's about all I got to say.
I thought they were so good.
Yeah, they weren't like they
Oh.
used them same way I did. Anyone got anything to add with the porgs, or should we just score them?
Sorry,
Oh,
you
sorry,
were
yeah.
cutting out a little bit, so we were
cut
kind
out.
of waiting. We didn't know if you were still talking. She loves porgs.
Yeah, I love porgs. They're really cute. I don't have mine here because I left it at work, but I take care of it every single day. And then I even left it at Ryan's car so he could remember it because he doesn't like it.
You know what? Here's the thing with porgs is they are 100%, and I'm okay with it. I've accepted it. They are a marketing tool to sell toys. That is the only reason for porgs. My problem with my first viewing was she was sitting next to me and brought the porg. So every time I saw porgs on the screen, I thought of the porg that was sitting in my lap. But they haven't bugged me in any other viewing. They really are cute. I love Chewy barbecuing the porg. I think that is hilarious. The bit with the lightsaber where one porg is like stomping on the lightsaber trying to turn it on and fry the other porg.
Wait, does that happen?
Yeah.
I never remember.
It's good. And along that same line, the caretakers, I think, were excellently used. I loved the caretakers when she blows the hole in the side of the building, and then when she cuts the boulder off and it just like knocks the thing out of their hands. I feel like the caretakers could have, if they had been used more, they could have become more shticky and annoying, but they only used the 2 jokes. That was a joke that they could have kept going back to. I'm so glad that they just kind of did it twice and moved on. Steven, let's wrap this up. It's been like 57 minutes. So Steven, give us your final thoughts and a score in raccoons of The Last Jedi.
So go into it. Well, we're past the spoilers, so this movie does have flaws. I'll be the first one to admit it. It's very enjoyable. It's very true to the Star Wars mythos. It's extremely daring with where it takes the characters. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Spencer,
Yeah.
what about you?
So I completely agree with everything Steven said. I think this movie takes some bold choices. It moves us in directions I never would have expected they would have had the courage to go, and I applaud it for that. I think that it introduces some great new characters and has some incredible sequences. It's one of my favorite theater-going experiences I think I've ever had. So I'm going to give this one a 9.5 raccoons out of 10.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I'm really happy that it's different from all the other Star Wars movies, and I loved everything about it. But I'm gonna give, and like Steven said and Spencer said, there are flaws, and every movie has. I mean, most movies there might be one that doesn't have it, but almost all of them
La
have.
La Land.
Yeah,
La La
exactly.
Land has
La
no
La Land,
flaws.
no flaws. So I'll give it a 9 out of 10 raccoons.
Cool. Awesome. I have, like Spence, I've seen this multiple times. It gets better on every viewing. This is just such a treat, and I have such intense, mad respect for Rian Johnson and company that they were able to take this bold step forward and make the movie they wanted to make and needed to make to further on the story that they're trying to tell. I think we all as fans get way too caught up in trying to dictate and predict everything that it's going. It's such a nice, refreshing experience to be able to step back and be swept away by a movie. And each time I've seen this, I've been 100% swept away to another galaxy far, far away. And I love it. This is, like I said, on par with Empire. I'm going to give it a 9.5. Home run for Lucasfilm. We'll see where we go from here. There's a lot to handle. Over under for everyone. Is Luke going to have a prevalent role in Episode 9? I personally believe we will see quite a bit more of Luke in episode 9, especially with the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher. I think in the rewriting process, they probably will include some more Force Ghost stuff with him that they weren't planning on including. Over or under, Steven, 70% that we are going to get a lot of Luke in this movie.
Wait, 70% chances you're thinking?
Like, are you 70% sure, over or under, that he's going to be in this movie?
No, I think they're going to do very much like Empire or Return of the Jedi with Obi-Wan, where he's a character that definitely counsels Rey or even Kylo. I think it'd be very interesting to see him appear to Kylo. So I think probably just about as much as we got Obi-Wan in 5 and 6. How about you, Bella? What do you think?
I agree with you, yeah. And I didn't think about it. That's a really interesting point. I would never think about that. So I agree with you. Same, like, yeah, just enough.
I think it is set up very well with Luke saying to Ben, the last thing he says is, "See you around, kid." I think that is so well set up that he's going to come back, and he's going to come back to both aid and a haunt. I want to be careful saying haunt, because I don't think he's going to be spooky ghost haunting Ben, but I think he will be a force that is there that reminds him of what he's done. Spence, go ahead and give us your thoughts, and then let's end this thing.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think he's to be in it. I think he might be with Kylo, kind of like Steven. But yeah, we've gone on pretty long, so I think I'm just gonna wrap this thing up. You guys can follow me on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Stardust at Spinny Hand. Where can they find you guys?
Oh, you can follow me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Good. Shoot.
Okay. So you can follow me on Twitter and on Twitter at BellaRomano_ and on Letterboxd and Stardust at Bella Romano.
Follow me on all of those things at Rye_Gordon. Steven?
Just follow me on Letterboxd, and I'd like to mention that I've seen more movies than Spencer and Ryan and Bella, according to Letterboxd.
Yeah, but we've seen Star Wars: The Last Jedi more than you, so
Not me.
There's
I'm
that.
the only one, I guess.
All right, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been a treat. Let us know in the comments if this is something that you'd like us to do again. These live streams, we used to do them all the time. It really was just an excuse for us to talk about this movie because we all loved it, obviously, by our scores. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It made $220 million in the last 3.5 days. So that says something, you know. We kind of got a big deal on our hands here. Go ahead, check it out. Check us out. Subscribe. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
I hope we're not still live.
You there, Spence?
I think Spence is gone. We probably are still live. Tell us.
Can you guys hear me?
We're definitely live.